This is an account of 4 psychonauts' experience with mixing several new elements into our circle of mind travel. Having heard about the combinations of Syrian rue and betel nut with P. cubensis, myself and 3 other travelers chose a departure date and planned well for it. All 4 are relatively experienced travelers in the readily available mediums. Our weights range from 240 pounds to 135 pounds. We started our travels by assigning each traveler a control situation prior to takeoff. 2 of the control subjects fasted 24 hours prior to the trip. The other 2 ate only light breakfast. We all chose to abstain from alcohol and only kept light fluids around for our takeoff. We started early in the day by chewing on 5 grams each of cracked betel nut mixed with lime powder to release the alkaloids. There was a noticeable buzz in all subjects, breathing became easier, and awareness was heightened, similar to a good speed buzz. 1.5 hours later each traveler ingested 1.25 grams of Syrian rue extract combined with 1 tablespoon of organic maple syrup. This was to attempt to make a sublingual transmission tolerable for as long as possible. We all lasted about 5 minutes then swallowed. Last came the catalyst for takeoff, the shrooms. 3 of the travelers consumed 6 grams of dried cubensis and I took 25 grams of fresh. These were all home cultivated. Now for the effects, these were carefully documented in the debriefing section of our trip, so here comes takeoff. Within 1/2 an hour of ingestion the 2 subjects who fasted were beginning to experience an overwhelming sense of hilarity. Myself being a subject who ate, I began to have pretty hardcore visuals at about the 45-minute mark. Kaleidoscope sky, and pulsing light flashes and a tunneling cloud formation were my first encounter. The group moved to a secluded field area at about 1.5 hour mark. The 3 other travelers began tripping extremely hard and they were thrown into an immediate sense of uncontrollable horror. I tried to help ease them through this part of their journey for several hours at a disruption to my personal platform. The 3 being far too uneasy about the surroundings moved back to the house to try and regain some level of comfort. I stayed in the field and crawled into a tight tent and began my own journey. I chose to engage into an eyes-closed journey of my hallucinations. Colors were extremely vivid and pulsating, patterns were constant and flowing with no real conclusion to any of them, they were all quite random. I finally began to attain a sense of flying through tunnels of multicolored lights and landscapes. This was at the 2-hour mark for me. My hallucinations began to delve into a combination of auditory and visual as the 2 paired together to present speaking entities of many forms that were seemingly attempting to communicate to me and guide me into my journey. I felt that for probably an hour I attempted to communicate with this entity who was tearing away pieces of the sky to show me what was underneath it all. But I was unable to let go enough to understand due to my feelings of concern for the rest of my team. Feeling like I needed to rejoin the group inside, I left this part of my trip. I entered the house to find a whole variety of trips from each traveler. One had sunken into heavy lethargy, stripped down to underwear and employing the fetal position on the floor. One launched into a fit of incoherent yelling and screaming. This was probably the most interesting to me at the time due to what was being yelled. A plethora of inhibitions were being attacked by this traveler and anyone not on the journey would have certainly been compelled to react to this, but we all agreed to let her explore this for herself. One was in an uncontrollable rollercoaster of laughter and fear due to the other traveler who was yelling at her hallucinations. I again felt myself in a position of responsibility and warded off my platform to monitor the others' reactions. At hour 4 the group appeared to have come into the glowing after effects stage. We began debriefing one another about the events and talking about each other's trip. Within a 1/2 hour a second wave ponded itself upon us and overcame us all. This was near debilitating. All of the group sunk into deep lethargy that prohibited movement. My hallucinations came on strong this time in the form of visuals and auditories. They were all in a glowing green and 3D forms, mostly insects and water scenarios, not frightening but very intimidating. The group later complained of severe breathing difficulties and near-death senses due to the sense that our heart rates and respirations began to compromise. This continued on until hour 7, at which point 3 of the members finally passed out. For some reason though I kept tripping well into the 9th hour, at which point I turned on the television and broke out the cannabis to try and extract myself from the trip. All members of this journey are fairly experienced, yet the addition of the Syrian rue more than doubled the effects of the dose. Most of the trips were very fluid and acid-like, and 3 of the members all related the overwhelming feeling that they would not return to normal once the heaviest part of the trip set in. The fluidity and vivid hallucinations made the trip very worthwhile for all, but I personally believe that the Syrian extract needs to be cut back to possibly half a gram. I also was quite concerned with the physiological effects of impaired respiration. I thought in my research that maybe the betel nut would counter that effect, but such was not the case. It was the only frightening part of my journey. Well worth the experience. Logging off until next journey.